I'm Marlene Beck, 68 years old, and the last time I stepped foot inside my son's house was the day I handed him the deed to it that morning. I wore my navy blue skirt suit, the same one I used to wear when I taught physics at Highland High. I had pressed the collar twice, smoothed down every wrinkle, even polished the buttons. I told myself it was just a formality, but deep down, I hoped today might change something between us. He didn't know yet that the house he was about to move into was mine. A surprise gift I'd kept to myself for months. By nightfall, I would stand outside on the sidewalk, watching strangers raise glasses in the dining room I paid for, and my daughter-in-law would tell me not to come any closer before I go any further. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and tap that like and subscribe button if you've ever given more than you got back. I grew up in Kansas City, in a house where we ironed cloth napkins and wrote thank you cards the same day gifts arrived. My folks weren't rich, but they were decent. My father delivered mail for 41 years. My mother took in sewing and kept a garden that fed half the block. They taught me that the best kind of wealth was the kind you could give away without keeping count. And I tried to carry that forward. I met Donald Beck when I was 22. He was the only man I ever loved and the only one who ever called me Marnie, like it was a song. He worked in accounting and was the kind of man who checked locks twice before bed and carried cash in a folded envelope marked just in case we raised our son Brian in a small colonial near the edge of town. I taught physics at Highland for 35 years and never took a sick day unless I had to. When Donald died of a heart attack 8 years ago, he left me with grief and a little insurance. Not a fortune, but enough to be comfortable. Brian was already married by then. He'd married Lindsay Hart a year before. Donald passed. I remember my husband whispering at the ceremony, "I hope she makes him happy." And something in his voice caught me off guard. At the time, I thought it was just a father's nerves. Now I know better from the very beginning. Lindsay kept her distance. She smiled when she had to, but never asked how I was. Once the twins were born, Adam and Ellie, she set rules for when I could see them, strict hours. Only in their home, always supervised Brian, who used to call me just to ask how to fix a leaky faucet. Became quiet. He worked in IT, made decent money. But Lindsay wanted more. A bigger house, a better zip code. Private school kids need the right neighborhood, Brian said 3 years ago, and I didn't hesitate. I gave them nearly a third of my savings to help with the down payment. It was never a loan. I told him that he hugged me, and Lindsay said, "You're a real lifesaver, Marlene," with a smile that never reached her eyes. After that, I saw them maybe once a month. Lindsay always found a reason to cut the visit short. A headache, a meeting, the kids are tired. Then last fall, I saw a listing for a house on Oak Ridge Lane. 4 bedrooms, blue shutters, a wide kitchen window that faced the park. The same street Lindsay had once pointed to when we were walking and said, "Now that's the kind of place I could see us." It was more than I ever planned to spend. But I couldn't get the thought out of my head. I met with the realtor, a woman named Heather, and bought it within a week. I didn't tell Brian or Lindsay. I wanted it to be a gift, a surprise, so I invited them for dinner 2 weeks ago. Made pot roast, Brian's favorite since middle school. Emma chatted with me about her science project. Adam barely looked up from his plate, and when dessert came, I told them. "I bought you a house," I said. "The one with the blue shutters on Oak Ridge." Lindsay's chair scraped the floor as she stood. Brian stared at me, open-mouthed. Emma gasped, and then Lindsay said 5 words that still echo in my ears. "We need to talk in private." Lindsay led me into the living room, shut the door behind us, and turned to face me. She folded her arms across her chest, chin, lifted voice low but clipped. "Are you following us?" she asked. I looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" She tilted her head. "The house on Oak Ridge." How did you know I liked that one? Brian mentioned it a few months ago. I said. I remembered you pointed it out once, and you always remember. She cut in. Always listening in, always showing up, always in our space. I heard the front door creak behind us. Brian had followed us in and stood a few steps back, his hands in his pockets, eyes flicking between us. Mom meant it as a gift, he said softly. She just wanted to help. Lindsay didn't look at him. She bought a house 2 blocks from ours. What does that tell you? She turned back to me. What's next? Popping in every morning to see what we're feeding the kids. I opened my mouth, but nothing came right away. I felt heat rise in my chest. I thought this would be something good for the family. She gave a dry laugh. You thought? That's the problem. You always think you know what's best. Every visit, it's a suggestion, a correction, a little sigh when I serve something you don't approve of. You wrap it all up in sweetness, but it's still control. Brian touched her shoulder. She pulled away. She always does this, Lindsay said, turning to him. She gives something and then expects us to owe her forever. A house like this isn't a gift, Brian. It's a leash. I stood still, trying to take it all in. That's not true, I said quietly. I never asked for anything in return. Lindsay raised an eyebrow. What about the parenting advice? The unsolicited budget tips? The subtle digs about screen time, about how we run our household? I couldn't answer. I hadn't meant them as digs. I had always believed I was helping. She stepped closer, her voice cool. So you'll sign it over fully? No. Right to live there, no legal claim, nothing hidden in fine print. Brian looked at me now, waiting. Yes, I said. It's all yours. Something shifted in her eyes. Not kindness, not warmth, but something that looked like satisfaction. Well, she said, brushing a piece of lint off her sleeve. That changes things. The next few days were a blur of papers and signatures. Lindsay took the lead with the notary asking questions, checking every clause. Brian said little, just nodded when asked, kept his head down. On the day everything was finalized, he gave me a brief hug in the lobby. Thanks, Mom. That's really generous. Lindsay gave me a smile with no softness behind it. Thank you, Marlene. We'll be having a housewarming on Saturday. Big party, lots of people. I perked up. I'd be happy to help with the setup, food, decorations, whatever you need. She paused just slightly. Oh, no need. We've got it covered. Outside, the sky was bright and the wind was soft. Brian stepped away to take a work call, and Lindsay and I stood near the curb in silence. Then she turned to me. You know, she said, staring off toward the trees now that the house is officially ours, I think it's best you not come to the party. I blinked. I'm sorry. She looked me straight in the eyes now. There'll be a lot of our friends, Brian's co-workers. It's going to be loud. Casual. You wouldn't enjoy it. I just thought... I trailed off. I gave you the house. And we're grateful, she said, smoothing her coat. But it's our house now. We get to decide who's invited. Before I could reply, Brian returned, and Lindsay's voice brightened like nothing had happened. Just talking about Saturday, she said. She was telling me I shouldn't worry about helping. I added, glancing at her, that it'll be too much for me. Brian nodded. Yeah, it's gonna be packed. Probably not your scene. I didn't say anything else. We said our goodbyes, and I walked back to my apartment. That night, I sat by the window, watching the light fade, wondering how I could have misread it all. The next morning, I called Lindsay. She picked up after 5 rings. Yes, Marlene, I just wanted to talk about the party, I said. I think there may have been a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding, she said, her voice flat. I was very clear. We don't want you there. I don't understand, I said. Why you gave us the house. We accepted it. We decide who comes inside. It's simple. There was a long pause. I was trying to hold back a lump in my throat. You were useful to us, she said. Now you're not. That's it? Then she laughed. It really gets to you, doesn't it? We tolerated your visits, your advice because we had to. Now we don't. So please, do us both a favor. Stay away. I set the phone down slowly and sat still. Her words echoed sharp and clean. That evening, I tried calling Brian. He picked up, but his voice was rushed. Mom, I've got a meeting in 5 minutes. I talked to Lindsay, I said. She said some things. About me. About how you only kept me around for the money. He didn't respond right away. Mom. You know Lindsay. She gets worked up. She didn't mean it. So, am I invited to the party? Well, he hesitated. She already made the list. It's mostly her friends. I think it'd be kind of awkward. I gave you the house, I said. We're grateful, he said quickly. But that doesn't mean we invite you to every event. I hung up after that, quietly, carefully, and the days that followed passed slowly. I went to work at the library, ran errands, cooked small meals, but the silence felt heavy. Until Thursday. My granddaughter Emma called. Grandma, are you coming to the party? I don't think I was invited, sweetheart, I said gently. What? But it's your house. Sometimes grown-ups make strange decisions, I told her. I heard Mom, she said. She told Dad you were just a means to an end, that now they don't have to deal with you anymore. I sat down at the kitchen table. Emma, I said softly, I don't want you to get in trouble with your parents. I want you to come, she said. It's not fair. I'll still be your grandmother, I said, even if I'm not at the party. The next day, I saw a missed call from Brian. When I called back, he asked if I could watch the kids the next day while they went furniture shopping. Tomorrow, I asked. Yeah, we're heading out early. Party's in the evening. So, I'm not welcome at the party, but I'm okay to babysit. There was a pause. Look, we just really need the help. I can't, I said. I have plans. What plans? I'm seeing some friends. A lie. But the truth would have hurt worse. That Saturday, as the sun went down, I put on my walking shoes and headed out. The house was just under half an hour away. I told myself I just wanted to stretch my legs to enjoy the evening. But I knew where I was going. When I turned onto Oak Ridge Lane, cars lined both sides. Music drifted through the air. Laughter. Glasses clinking. I stood across the street beneath the trees. Through the windows, I saw people mingling drinks in hand. My son stood near the front door. Lindsay beside him. She wore navy blue and smiled as she greeted a well-dressed couple with a kiss on the cheek. They stepped back inside. Lindsay lingered on the porch and lit a cigarette. She turned her head slightly. Her eyes landed on me. She didn't look away. She crossed the street slowly, heels clicking against the pavement. She stopped a few feet from me. What are you doing here? She asked. I was just taking a walk. This is pathetic. I wanted to see the house, I said. We're settling in just fine, she said. You won't be seeing the inside? I tried to meet her eyes. Why are you like this with me? What have I ever done to deserve it? She smiled. You really don't know, do you? She took a drag from her cigarette. You've always been in the way, always hovering, always meddling. I don't need you. I never have. At that moment, the door opened again. Brian stepped outside. Everything okay? Your mom's been watching us from across the street, Lindsay said. I was just passing by, I said. Brian's face was blank. Mom, it's not really the best time. I know, I said. I was leaving. I'll call you tomorrow. I nodded. As I turned and walked back the way I came, the street behind me filled with noise and light and voices that didn't include me. I kept walking, quietly, one step at a time. The next morning, I made a phone call to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. It was time to make things official. I called Gerald Langley the next morning. He'd been Don's attorney for over 30 years and handled our wills after Don passed. We hadn't spoken since Emma was born. He answered on the second ring, same gravelly voice, same old-fashioned courtesy. Marlene, he said, what can I do for you? I need to know what my options are, I told him, regarding a gift that wasn't received in good faith. He didn't ask questions right away. Just said, come in Monday, we'll talk. That weekend was quiet. I didn't leave the apartment much. I watered the violets on the windowsill, refolded some linens that didn't need folding, cleaned out the kitchen drawers. The air felt different, not colder, just still. There was nothing left to guess at now. On Monday, I rode the bus to Gerald's office downtown. It was a small building tucked between a tax firm and a shuttered bakery. Same green awning, same brass handle on the door. He was already waiting with a manila folder and a legal pad. We sat in his office, just the two of us, no assistants, and I told him everything. I left nothing out. The down payment, the surprise deed, the housewarming, Lindsay's words, the sidewalk, the phone call. He listened without interrupting, just tapped his pen lightly every so often. When I finished, he looked down at his notes, then back at me. Do you remember how the gift deed was written? He asked. You drafted it, I said. 3 months ago. I told you I wanted it to be simple. No strings, just a full transfer. He nodded. That's what I thought. But I added a clause you may not remember. I blinked. A clause? He reached into the folder, pulled out a copy of the deed, and pointed to a paragraph. Standard in some states, he said. In cases of gross ingratitude, the donor may revoke a gift deed within a specific time frame. It rarely comes up, but it's there. He slid a form across the desk. If you want to file a formal petition, I can start the paperwork. The house is still in your name for another 3 days. After that, they'll record the transfer, and it'll be out of your hands. I stared at the paper. And if I do this, they'll be served. They may contest it. It'll go to mediation. Worst case, a hearing. But we've got enough here to make a case. I nodded slowly. I'll sign. When I stepped outside, the sun was higher than I expected. The bus came quickly. I sat in the middle row and didn't look out the window much. That night, I went through old photo boxes. One of Emma in her Halloween witch costume. One of Brian holding a model rocket. One of Lindsay barely smiling at their wedding reception. I didn't cry. I just sat still. 2 days later, I got the first call. It was Brian. Mom, he said, what is this? I spoke to a lawyer, I said. We filed a petition to revoke the gift. You can't do that. I can, I said. It's within the statute. There was a long pause. I thought this was unconditional. I thought it was received in gratitude. He sighed. Lindsay's upset. I imagine so. She says you're doing this to punish her. I'm doing this because I was treated like a burden, after I gave away my home savings. He didn't speak for a moment. Then, she wants to talk to you. Later that afternoon, Lindsay called. Her voice was brisk, tight. This is spiteful, she said. I was honest with you, Marlene. You asked why I didn't want you at the party. I told you. You told me I was useful, and now I'm not. You said it yourself, it was a gift. You don't get to take it back just because your feelings got hurt. I'm not doing this over feelings, I said. I'm doing it because respect matters. And there wasn't any. She was quiet for a beat. Emma's going to hear about all this, you know. Adam, too. Is that what you want? I want my dignity, I said. You can explain it however you choose. She laughed bitterly. You want to see your grandchildren again? I suggest you drop this. I said nothing. She hung up first. The papers were delivered the next morning by courier. I got confirmation from Gerald that the notice had been received and acknowledged. By Friday, I'd gotten 4 voicemails from Brian, none of which I returned. I spent the weekend clearing out my closets. Not to move, just to move forward. Sunday morning, I walked to the grocery store, picked up oranges, milk, a tin of coffee. At the checkout, I saw a flyer taped to the window for a fall photography class at the community center. I took one. On the walk back, I passed a family on the sidewalk. 2 girls chasing leaves, their mother calling after them gently. I watched them disappear around the corner. That evening, my phone rang again. This time, it was Emma. Grandma, hi, sweetheart. Dad says we might have to move. I know. Is it because of what Mom said? There are a lot of reasons. There was a pause on the line. I miss you. I miss you too. She lowered her voice. You're not a burden. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, thank you. Before we hung up, she asked, can I still call you? Always, I said. Anytime. After we said goodbye, I sat by the window for a long time. Outside, the street was empty. No wind. Just the quiet hum of a neighbor's dryer spinning somewhere down the hall. That week, Gerald filed the follow-up paperwork. The case was progressing. I stayed home most days, except for the photography class. We met Tuesday evenings in the old high school auditorium. I hadn't held a camera in years, but it came back quickly. There was something steadying about looking through a lens, choosing what stayed in the frame and what didn't. I took a photo of a branch outside my window. Just a single leaf clinging to it. Nothing special, but I printed it anyway and pinned it up on the wall. The night before the first mediation hearing, I laid out my outfit on the bed, gray slacks, white blouse cardigan with pearl buttons. Then, I turned off the light. Sleep didn't come easily, but I let the quiet fill the room. By morning, I was ready. The mediation took place at a neutral office near the courthouse, just a beige building with a single oak tree outside and a cracked sidewalk leading up to the door. Gerald met me at the front entrance. He had his folder tucked under one arm and offered a quiet good morning as we walked in together. Brian and Lindsay were already seated in the conference room. She wore a fitted blazer and tapped her fingers against the legal pad in front of her. Brian gave me a small nod, didn't say much else. The mediator introduced herself, gave a brief rundown of the process, and invited each side to share their understanding of the dispute. Lindsay leaned forward first. Marlene gifted us the house, she said. It was hers. Now it's ours. And we've made financial and emotional investments in it since. This petition is retaliatory. The mediator turned to me. Would you like to respond? I kept my hands folded. I gave them the house in good faith, I said. No conditions, that's true. But I expected kindness. Not celebration in my absence, not exclusion, not being used for childcare and then shut out of their lives. Gerald added, in our jurisdiction, the law allows for revocation of a gift if the recipient demonstrates gross ingratitude. The evidence we've submitted, texts, voicemails, and witness statements points clearly to that. Lindsay let out a faint scoff. So what? She's upset she wasn't invited to a party. The mediator held up a hand. Let's keep this focused. I didn't look at Lindsay after that. I focused on the mediator, on the questions on staying steady. The session lasted nearly 3 hours. We didn't reach an agreement, But we left with next steps, an evidentiary hearing, likely within the month. As we packed up our things, Brian touched my elbow lightly. "Mom," he said, "do you really want this to get uglier?" I paused. I'd like my family back, but I won't beg for a place in it. When I got home, I made a pot of soup, folded some laundry, and pulled the flyer off the fridge for the photography class. I'd missed one session that week and didn't want to miss another. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. A picture of me sitting alone at the bus stop outside the courthouse, legs crossed, hands in my lap. No message, no name, just the image. I deleted it, blocked the number, and turned the phone face down on the table. That afternoon, I stopped by the community center early. The instructor was prepping equipment and asked if I wanted to help set up. I did. We talked about lighting and shutter speed, and by the time the others arrived, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: focus. Something outside of the noise. Over the next week, I stayed busy. I took photos of church windows, of ducks on the riverbank, of the worn paint on the benches in Jefferson Park. I visited the bakery on Main Street for a lemon bar and found myself lingering near the bulletin board with all the paper slips, dog walkers, guitar lessons, prayer groups. It was in that bakery that I ran into Evelyn Shaw. We'd worked together years ago back at the elementary school. She was retired now too and still wore those long scarves she'd always favored. "Goodness," she said when she saw me. "It's been too long." We sat with our pastries and caught up. At some point, she mentioned her daughter had gone through a rough time with her own kids, estranged, then reconciled slowly. I didn't say much, just nodded. Before we left, she reached into her purse and handed me a small card. "If you ever want to talk, or walk, or not talk, I'm usually up by 6. That night I called her. We didn't talk long, but I slept better than I had in weeks. 2 days before the hearing, Gerald called. "There's been a new development," he said. "The opposing counsels reached out. They want to negotiate a private agreement before we go before the judge." "What kind of agreement?" "They'll vacate the property within 30 days. They'll remove their names from all pending documents. In exchange, you agree not to pursue damages." I sat with that for a moment. "Do they have somewhere to go?" "I don't know," he said. "But that's not your concern anymore." I told him I'd think about it. That night, I sat in the living room with a small box of photos on my lap. Most were older, dawn fishing Brian as a baby, Christmas mornings long gone. I pulled out one of Emma. She couldn't have been more than 6. She was standing in the yard with a plastic tiara and a mud pie on a paper plate. I set the photo on the coffee table, then picked up the phone. When Brian answered, I said I got the offer. He waited. "I'll accept it," I said. "But I want one thing." "What's that?" "I want to see Emma. One last time. Just the 2 of us." He didn't respond right away. "Lindsay won't like that. It's not about Lindsay." After a pause, he said, "I'll ask." I didn't expect a yes. But 2 days later, he called back. "She'll meet you at the library," he said. "Saturday morning. 10 sharp. Just an hour." I agreed. That Saturday I arrived early. I wore the cardigan Emma once complimented, the one with the tiny blue buttons. I brought a book I knew she liked and a wrapped notebook I'd personalized for her. She walked in alone, carrying her backpack. Her hair was pulled back with a headband, and she smiled when she saw me. "Grandma." We sat in the children's corner, away from the windows. "I don't understand why this is all happening," she said. "I don't either, sweetheart, but it's not your fault. I told Mom it was mean. I told Dad, too." I held her hand. "Sometimes grown-ups don't know how to fix what they've broken." She opened the notebook. I'd left little notes on some pages, reminder stories, silly memories. She looked at me. "Can I still call you?" "Anytime," I said. even if it's just to say hi. When our hour was up, she hugged me twice. Don't let them push you around, she whispered. I smiled. I'll be all right. As she walked away, I stayed seated for a few minutes. Then I stood, smoothed my skirt, and stepped outside. The next day, Gerald finalized the agreement. I would get the house back. No court ruling, no press, no more waiting. They would be gone by the end of the month. The house was quiet the morning I returned. Not empty, just still. A half-packed box sat on the entry table, one of mine the label half peeled. There was a faint smell of lemon polish in the air, the kind Lindsay always used on the wood floors. I stood in the doorway for a moment, keys still in my hand, then stepped inside. They'd moved out the day before. Gerald confirmed it that morning. No note, no final word, just gone. I walked through slowly. The furniture was mostly where I left it, though the arrangement in the living room had changed. The blue armchair was pushed up against the back wall, and the photos on the hallway ledge had been taken down. My bedroom was untouched. The linens still folded neatly, the lamp still at the same soft angle I always kept it at night. In the kitchen, the mug I'd used for years, white with a little hummingbird painted on the side, was tucked behind newer glassware. I pulled it forward, rinsed it, and set it beside the coffee pot. I didn't rush to unpack. I didn't turn on music or the TV. I just sat at the edge of the couch and looked out the window for a long while. Later that afternoon, I went to the backyard. The raised beds still held the rosemary and the mint I'd planted last spring. The garden gloves were missing, but the clippers were still hanging on their nail behind the shed door. I took a few cuttings and brought them inside. That evening, I reheated a bowl of soup turned on the porch light and stood barefoot on the back steps. The air was just starting to carry the edge of fall. The next day, I made a list. New sheets for the guest room. Replace the hall light bulb. Refill the prescription I'd let lapse during the hearings. Visit the bank to update the deed transfer confirmation. I added a line for something else too, something I hadn't done in a long time. A church directory call to see if choir still meets Thursdays. I hadn't sung since Dawn's service, but the thought had been rising quietly like something steady pushing through the cracks. A few days later, I called Evelyn. We met for coffee again, and afterward she helped me rearrange the living room. We moved the armchair back near the window where I liked it and pulled the old quilt out of the cedar chest. She looked at me as we stood there. Feels more like you now. I nodded. That weekend I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Emma using a friend's phone. I know I'm not supposed to, she said, but I wanted to hear your voice. I sat down at the kitchen table. I'm glad you called. Things are weird at home. They don't talk about it, but I can tell. Dad's quiet. Mom acts like nothing happened. I miss our talks. I miss them too, I said. Are you doing okay in school? She told me about a history project about a book she was reading. We didn't talk long, just enough. Before she hung up, she said, I keep the notebook you gave me under my pillow. I add things to it sometimes. I smiled. That's good. She hesitated. Do you think we'll see each other again? I hope so, I said. But either way, you'll always have a place with me. That doesn't change. After we hung up, I sat quietly for a while. Then I went to the closet, pulled out a small box from the top shelf, and started sorting through my sewing supplies. I'd been meaning to finish a project I'd started months ago, a patchwork bag Emma had picked out fabric for. The days passed gently. I attended one choir practice. They welcomed me back without questions. I helped set up chairs at the center before Thursday night community meals. I brought lemon squares and found they'd disappeared before the meal even started. One morning, while clipping herbs in the yard, I noticed a small envelope tucked between the slats of the porch railing. No address, just my name in careful script. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I shouldn't have said what I said it read. I was angry, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I don't expect forgiveness. But I didn't want silence to be the last word. No signature, but I knew the handwriting. I folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. That weekend, I saw a flyer at the post office for a community mentorship program. It paired retired educators with local high school students looking for extra guidance, career paths, life skills, that sort of thing. I filled out the interest form before I left the parking lot. I didn't hear from Brian after that. No more calls, no letters. I didn't expect any, but the quiet in the house felt different now. Not lonely, just mine. One afternoon, I sat by the window with a notebook and started writing down the names of people I hadn't called in a while. Old neighbors, a cousin I'd lost touch with. I made a point to reach out to one each day. The sun was lower in the sky by the time I finished the list. The wind had shifted again, cooler now, sharper. I stood, closed the notebook, and turned on the porch light. The call came on a Thursday morning. I was folding laundry in the back room when the phone rang, that old landline ring, still sharp and steady. I wiped my hands and picked it up. "Mrs. Wembley." The voice was male polite. "This is Officer Hart with County Police. Do you have a moment?" I straightened up, heart tapping once against my ribs. "Yes, we have a situation we'd like to discuss with you. It concerns a recent incident at your property. Are you able to come by the station this afternoon?" I agreed, wrote down the address, and sat back in the chair beside the dryer. I didn't move for a few minutes. That afternoon, I wore my gray coat, the one with the smooth lining that always helped me feel a little more grounded. The station was tucked between the DMV and a strip mall. Nothing dramatic, just low brick and wide windows. Officer Hart met me in the lobby. He had kind eyes, younger than I expected, and led me to a small interview room. "There was an incident Monday evening," he began. "We received reports of a break-in attempt at your home." I blinked. "I wasn't home Monday evening. I was at the church dinner. No one said anything. It happened around 9. A neighbor across the street reported a vehicle idling outside your driveway. When officers arrived, the car was gone, but they found signs of tampering at the back fence. Someone had tried to pry it open. He opened a file and pushed a printout toward me. Surveillance still. Blurry black and white. A figure male, possibly standing near the edge of the backyard gate. Head down. Hard to make out, but something about the stance felt familiar. Unmistakably familiar. "Do you recognize this person?" Hart asked. "I can't be sure," I said, "but I think that's my son." He gave a slow nod. That was our suspicion based on the vehicle match. Brian's name came up on the registration for a silver Tahoe. The car seen driving away fits that model. "We've attempted contact but haven't heard back." He paused. "I want to be clear, ma'am. No one was hurt. Nothing was stolen. But we wanted you to be aware, especially given the recent property transfer and legal context." I nodded. My hands were folded neatly in my lap. I kept them still. "Would you like to press charges?" I shook my head. "No. I just want it documented. That's all." After I left the station, I stopped by the store to buy a second motion light for the backyard. I also picked up new batteries for the old flashlight in the drawer. Then I drove straight home and locked every window, even the one in the laundry room that barely opened. That evening, I called Gerald. I told him what had happened. He didn't say much, just said he'd update the case file. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No handwriting, just a typed message. "You've made your choice. Don't expect forgiveness." I folded it twice and slid it into a manila folder where I'd kept copies of everything: documents, texts, voicemail transcripts. I labeled it post-surrender correspondence and placed it in the fireproof box beside my bed. I didn't feel angry, just tired. The following week, Evelyn invited me to a quiet women's group at the center. Nothing formal. Just tea, soft music, and a bit of quiet conversation. I brought lemon cookies and sat next to a woman named Lorraine, who showed me photos of her twin grandsons. She'd raised them after her daughter passed. We talked about garden pests and slow cookers, and whether or not those new dishwasher pods really worked. When I came home that evening, the porch light was flickering. I replaced the bulb and stood a moment looking out toward the end of the driveway. The shadows were long across the grass. Nothing stirred, but something had shifted in me. The next morning, I scheduled a locksmith to come out and change all the locks, front door, back door, garage. Even the one on the old storm cellar, no one used anymore. I also had them install a deadbolt on the side gate and a camera near the shed. Later that week, I found a voicemail from Emma. Just her voice quiet. "I saw Dad looking at your Facebook page," she said. "He thinks I don't notice, but he misses you, even if he won't say it." I saved the message and didn't call back right away. Instead, I sat down and wrote her another letter. Inside, I tucked a photograph one I'd taken at the park, the river, reflecting autumn trees, 2 ducks gliding through the water. I wrote a small note on the back. "There's peace in still water. You'll know what to do when it's time." I mailed it the next morning. The wind picked up that week. The trees behind the house turned sharper yellow, their leaves scattering across the driveway. I raked them twice, then gave up and let them fall. It was a Tuesday when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman in a navy blue blazer holding a folder. She introduced herself as a representative from the County Family Services Office. "We've received a call," she said. "An anonymous tip about potential elder endangerment. That you may be unwell, isolated, possibly coerced into signing away property. We're obligated to follow up." I stepped aside and let her in. She asked gentle questions, asked to see my kitchen, my medication drawer, the pantry. She noted the photo albums, the books on the side table, the name tag from the community choir still resting on the kitchen counter. I offered her tea. She declined, but stayed long enough to finish her checklist. "May I ask who made the report?" I asked as she stood to leave. "We can't disclose that," she said. "But I will note that everything here seems perfectly in order." She paused at the doorway. "Miss Wembley, for what it's worth, you're not the first person I've visited this month under these kinds of circumstances. You're doing better than most." I thanked her, closed the door gently. Then I sat in the armchair by the window and watched the leaves drift across the yard until the sun began to fade. That evening, I brought the fireproof box to the kitchen table and laid everything out: copies, photos, notes, dates, the letter, even the envelope from the tipster. I took a deep breath. Then I called Gerald. "I think it's time," I said. "Let's finish this properly." Gerald met me at the courthouse just before 900. He had on a charcoal suit and carried a slim leather briefcase, his expression calm but firm. I'd worn my dark green blouse and the brooch James gave me on our 25th anniversary. Not for show, just something solid to keep near. We walked through the side entrance. The courtroom was already half full. I saw them before they saw me. Brian, Michaela, and even Darren. They were seated in the second row, whispering to each other, their faces drawn tight. Gerald gave a short nod toward the clerk. Then we took our place on the right side. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver gray hair, entered shortly after. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just got right to business. "This is a motion hearing to review the voluntary property transfer executed by Edith Wembley," she said. "Counsel, you may proceed." Gerald stood and spoke plainly. "Your Honor, we will demonstrate that Ms. Wembley acted under pressure and incomplete information, and that certain parties made misrepresentations to induce her consent. We're asking the court to nullify the quitclaim deed, restore full title to Ms. Wembley, and open investigation into financial coercion." There wasn't a sound in the room. Michaela leaned forward. Brian's jaw moved tight. The judge looked toward their side. "Do you have counsel today?" Brian cleared his throat. No, Your Honor. We weren't expecting a hearing like this. You were served? Notice, she replied. You may respond now or request a continuance. He asked for 5 minutes. She granted it. They stepped into the hallway. I stayed seated. When they returned, Brian spoke again, his voice low but clear. We didn't force Mom to do anything. She said she wanted to simplify things. We never asked her to give up the house. Gerald stood and handed the clerk a set of documents. If I may. Your Honor, Exhibit A includes voice recordings, text message logs, and notarized testimony from third-party witnesses, including 2 from a local pastor and Ms. Wembley's medical provider. Exhibit B is the anonymous letter sent to Ms. Wembley days after the transfer. The judge reviewed the files carefully. It took nearly 20 minutes. When she finished, she closed the folder gently and folded her hands. This court finds that undue influence did occur. The quitclaim deed is hereby voided. Full legal title to the property at 108 Cherry Hill Lane returns to Edith Wembley, effective immediately. She looked at Brian and Michaela. Furthermore, this matter will be referred to the District Attorney's Office for review under Elder Protection statutes. You are advised to seek legal counsel. Darren stood abruptly. You're ruining the family over a house. The judge didn't respond. She gavelled the hearing closed and rose from the bench. As the courtroom emptied, I stood beside Gerald and looked straight ahead. Brian didn't meet my eyes. We stepped outside into the early afternoon sun. The air was cool, crisp. Gerald took off his glasses and polished them with the edge of his tie. I'll file the follow-up paperwork this week, he said. You did the hard part. I nodded. Thank you. Back home, I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The rooms felt quieter than before. Not empty, just still. I poured a cup of tea and sat by the window. The next morning, I had a voicemail from Emma. Mom, I heard about what happened. I'm sorry. I didn't know it had gone that far. I just wanted everyone to get along. But I think it's better this way. Later that week, Officer Hart called to follow up. He let me know the report had been forwarded. There would likely be no trial, just a formal warning and mandatory classes. But that was fine by me. I didn't want them punished. Just stopped. The locksmith came again and added a reinforced bolt to the basement door. I paid in cash and tipped him with a slice of banana bread and a jar of apple jam I'd canned last fall. The following Sunday, Evelyn and I sat together at the community concert. We watched a young quartet play Shenandoah on fiddles and cello. The audience was mostly quiet listening. When it ended, there was soft applause, and a little girl in front of us turned to her mother and whispered, I liked that one. Evelyn smiled at me. Peaceful, isn't it? She said. I nodded. It is. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed with a notepad and wrote a list of things I'd learned to do on my own again. Fix the heater vent, rewire a lamp, speak clearly in a courtroom, sleep without checking the locks twice. At the bottom, I added one more line. Be still and trust what I know. The wind picked up around midnight. I left the window open just a crack and listened to it move through the trees. The house didn't feel like something I had to protect anymore. It felt like something that had protected me. The last frost came early that year. I noticed it one morning as I stepped out to get the paper, the grass edged in silver, the birdbath frozen in a perfect glaze. I stood on the porch a while, holding the paper, but not reading it, just letting the cold settle into the morning. The quiet felt different now. Not empty, just calm. Like the house, and I had finally come to an understanding. Gerald called to let me know the last of the paperwork had gone through. Title secured, legal action closed. Brian and Michaela had agreed to a settlement that included a written statement, no contest. There'd be no court case, no more letters, no more calls, just stillness. Emma came by 2 Sundays later. She brought muffins and stood awkwardly at the door, her hand hovering like she wasn't sure if she should knock. When I opened it, she looked smaller than I remembered, her shoulders tucked in, eyes tired. I let her in without a word. We sat at the table with mugs of weak coffee. She didn't try to explain anything. She just said, "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I thought if I stayed out of it, things would fix themselves. I didn't tell her how many nights I'd wished she'd called. I didn't need to. I just reached across the table and touched her hand. That was enough. Later that week, I found an old photo in a drawer, me, James, and the boys, when they were small, standing in front of the oak tree in the backyard. Darren was missing a front tooth. Brian had a frog in his pocket. I set it back in the drawer gently and closed it. Some people ask if I ever think about moving, starting fresh somewhere warmer, maybe closer to Emma. But this house, with its creaky floors and stubborn windows, has held every part of my story, the joy, the heartbreak, the lessons. It's where I learned to be still, to be clear, to hold my ground with grace. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence that followed. But even in that silence, I found something I didn't expect, a kind of rootedness, a quiet strength that had been there all along, just waiting for me to notice. I don't check the locks twice anymore. I water the mums on the porch. I bake a little more than I used to. Sometimes I take 2 cookies down to the neighbor boy who mows my lawn without asking for payment. His mother always texts thank you afterward. This life, what's left of it, what I've rebuilt from the quiet, it's not flashy. It's not grand. But it's mine. Every inch of it earned. If you're listening to this and you felt forgotten or pushed aside by the very people you once carried in your arms, please know that your story doesn't end there. You are not what they tried to take from you. You are what you've kept safe, what you've grown back. And if you found something in this story that made you feel seen, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to feel the same. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourself. You deserve peace.